Phase 1, end anti-people economic policies. Second phase, end special privileges for the ruling class. Third phase, return political power and national wealth to the working people. These are the three phases of what the movement Revolution Now clamors for. Now, they want these things to be effected in the government. They want these things to be effected in Nigerian constitution. They want these things to be effected. Now, the government has been saying on its own that the movement is about revolution, trying to depose the government, trying to bring about collapse of the administration. That's what the government has been claiming. Now, is there any truth to that? Is that true? That the movement simply wants to depose the government? That the movement wants to bring about an end to the democratic process in Nigeria? Now let's go into what the movement claims they want to do under each of those phases. They have a couple of policy ideas for each of those phases. The first one is end anti-people economic policies. Under that, we have return of fuel prices and electricity tariffs to their levels in 1999. Now, for those people that don't understand how economics work, returning fuel prices to the way they were in 1999, which is basically about reducing fuel tariffs and fuel prices and electricity tariffs, is that we already have severe drop in the naira. We have so much inflation in this nation that it is simply impossible to return the prices of fuel and electricity to what they used to be back then. Now, I would want that to be done. I'm a Nigerian. I want that to be done. But it is simply impossible. It is absolutely impossible. You need to realize that the government runs part of the power industry. That's true. Part of the fuel supply. That's true. But some of all these other things are private also. And not just that only. The government does not have infinite amount of money. The government has not infinite amount of money. You can't just make the government pay for all these things. Now, you might think, why is government paying for anything? We only ask them to return the price to what it used to be back then. Now, this is it. If the government returns the price to what it used to be back then, what you're doing is that the government is actually subsidizing the price of those things. The government is subsidizing the price of those things for you to get them at that price. That means once you get it cheap, the government is paying for it. So we are actually going back to fuel subsidy, massive fuel subsidy, like serious fuel subsidy. Now, I would want the government to do it. I want it. But it is simply impossible. You cannot do that. It's impossible. Economically, it's impossible. Now, it's a very lofty idea. It's a very good idea. I would like it to happen. It's completely impossible. It cannot be done. Now, and to estimated and inflated billing by the electricity distribution company, which is a very, very good thing. The discos, all the inflated pricing, inflated billing. I mean, you have just a small shop and suddenly you have to pay 30,000, 50,000 naira for a single month. It's mind-boggling. It's absolute crap. So that's is a policy idea that I think the government should be able to do. Now, the next one is no devaluation of the naira. This is kind of similar to the first point. Devaluation of the naira is not something that we suddenly decide, okay, we want to devalue the naira or something like that. Whether or not we devalue the naira has a particular price in the open market. Now, Back when the Buhari administration came into power, they refused to devalue the naira. The official price was 197 naira to $1. That was the official price. But on the open market, it was 360 something, or even higher than that at some points. Now, for the government to have the naira at, and to sustain the naira at 197 that it was back then, or 198 as the case may be, for them to sustain that, they had to subsidize the dollar for people to get. So if you want to get the dollar, instead of getting it at 360, which means the government buys the dollar at 360 or whatever it was then, and subsidize it to sell it to you. They buy it and sell it to you at 197. So the government was running at a serious loss. So it was not like the naira was necessarily 197 and then we intentionally decided to devalue it. That was not the point. The naira was already devalued. If there is inflation, if there's problem with your economy, your value is going to drop. Your currency value is going to drop. It does not depend on your country. Whether or not you like it, it will drop on the open market. It will drop. Now, if you refuse to devalue your currency to keep up with the open market, your currency is going to have a lot of issues. And then you are going to keep people in a sort of funny dream, sort of funny fantasy that the naira is not devalued, the naira is still strong against the dollar and all of that, while in fact all you are doing is trying to subsidize it so that people can get it at a cheaper price. So no matter what you think about it, devaluing it, not devaluing it, is still the value it is on the open market. So not devaluing the naira, yeah, if it's willfully devaluing the naira, that's true. They should not willfully devalue the naira like China does in devaluing its currency so that it can compete on the open market in import and export issue. But it's going to hurt the economy if you don't make sure that the value, the official value, corresponds to the open market value. Now, I'm going to make so much explanation on this later on in further videos, but you need to realize that. Then again, the next one is abolition of tuition fees in all public universities and secondary schools. Now, if you try to abolish tuition fees, no school fees for public schools, public secondary schools, public universities, you know what you're going to get? What you're going to get is social system for the education, which is going to bring about crappy education for the country. I mean, everyone can think about the kind of system that you have in your public schools, even when you are paying. When you are not paying, it's going to get a lot worse, like seriously worse. Now, it seems counterintuitive, like, oh yes, the government has all the money, the government can always subsidize these things, the government can pay everything, that we don't need to pay this, we don't need to pay that. Some people always refer back to the time of Awolowo and things like that. Oh, yes, we had free education back then, you know, free education, why can't we have it back now? And all sorts of things like that. Now, you can have it back, but it's not like you're having it free at nobody's expense. Remember, the government gets revenue not just by printing money. The government does not get revenue by printing money. The government gets revenue by taxation. The government gets revenue by taxation, which means if they are going to support that, you are going to be taxed more. You will be taxed more. And remember, the other source of revenue, which is fuel, is not very stable these days. So many things are happening around. If you establish a system on fuel economy that fluctuates around every once in a while, what you get is a situation where you can't pay the salaries of the workers, you can't pay the salaries of the teachers. Things start to deteriorate in the schools. Another part is when there is no profit incentive for the people in the school. Like the principal, he doesn't really care about the standard of the school as much as possible, since he's going to get his money no matter what. What government is going to pay him is not going to depend on whether or not the school is progressing or not. It's not going to depend whether or not the school standard is high enough. That's the problem you have. The standard of education is going to fall drastically if government takes over the entire thing. No profit incentive, nothing. All public schools are being made to be completely free. Another thing is the government cannot even sustain it. We like to talk about how rich the government is. Some people often forget that we have so much debt outside. The nation is in debt, billions of dollars. We are in debt. And yet you want to figure and add this onto the shoulders of the government. The government should shoulder this. I understand where this is coming from. It's from a very compassionate heart, from compassionate thinking for the common people. But the problem is, what you tend towards when you do this is you're tending towards socialism. You're tending towards that ill, that terrible ill in economic systems, socialism. Now, I'm going to make another video later on how horrible socialism is and the reason why socialism is horrible and causes a downfall of any society where it is practiced, like Venezuela, like the Soviet Union, like communist China, and some other places like that. The only reason why China is succeeding right now is because they liberalized the economy and made sure that the economy is open as much as possible. That's what they call communism with Chinese characteristics. It's basically capitalism, open market. That's the reason why you can order things from China right now, ship things to China and things like that, but especially ordering from China. The economy is now open. People can do things for their own selfish interest. That is, I'm going to get the money out of it. That is what is going to push you to do and produce the services that people want, because you will get money out of it. So it's your own self-interest that makes you to do those things. But if you have no incentive, no profit incentive for doing things, you end up not doing it as effectively as possible. Then you have to add the aspect of corruption in the government. People are going to keep mismanaging the funds supplied to the Ministry of Education and things like that. So if you pump more money into the Ministry of Education in order to do this and make sure that everything is free, a whole huge part of the money you are pumping into the economy or into the educational sector are going to be stolen by people. They will just steal everything. Now, the next one is immediate payment of the 30,000 naira minimum wage. Now, for government workers, I have no issues with that. The government should pay it. The government agreed to that. They need to pay it. So I have no issues with that. But no private sector or company should be forced to do that. Because if you do that with the private sector, what you are going to have is a lot of people losing their jobs, because the companies cannot keep up with having to pay every single one 30,000 naira. So they have to lay off some people in order to keep paying that amount, in order to keep up with the 30,000 naira to their employers. So you're going to you're going to get unemployment. You're going to have people losing their jobs. That's what they're going to get out of that. And some people who might get jobs, that would like to get a job that would maybe pay them 20,000 naira, will not be able to get a job after that because they cannot be hired, because the organization does not think that the work they will be doing is as worthy as that, or is worth being paid 30,000 naira. So they rather not hire them. So you have a whole lot of people on the street, which means it's only going to worsen the problem of unemployment. People that could be employed to get 20,000, 15,000, 10,000 naira. That is horrible amount of payments, but at least they would have a job. Now they won't be able to have a job if you force the private entities to pay the 30,000 naira minimum wage. The government has no choice. It has agreed to that. It has to pay it. So that's for that. Then the next one is immediate release of all political prisoners, including Shiite leader Ibrahim El-Zakzaky and his wife. I have no problem with that. The government should release those people. Yeah, no problem with that. Then the second phase, all public officials must be banned from educating their children in private schools in Nigeria or in schools in foreign countries. That's just BS. That's absolute crap. That's bullshit. Why would you ban anyone from choosing the place where they have to educate their children? It's absolute BS. Now, I understand where they're coming from. if the children don't school here, then they will not know how horrible our educational system is, and which means they will not intend to fix it. I understand where that is coming from, but it's absolute BS. You have no right to force people to choose, to constrain people to where they have to take their children to. Now, where you can attack is the aspect of the corruption, but you can't attack where they decide to send their children to. You can't. It's absolute BS. People have the right to send their children to wherever they want to send them to. It's freedom of choice. So you can't just bring about that. Now, that is nothing against the law. It's nothing against the law to say that or to demand that or whatever like that. But just morally speaking, it's BS. The next one is, these officials must be banned also from obtaining healthcare in private hospitals in Nigeria or in hospitals in foreign countries. That's absolute BS again. Why would you have to ban someone simply because the person is working for the government from having access? Choosing the kind of healthcare that they want, choosing the kind of quality of healthcare that they want in private hospitals and foreign hospitals. It's absolute crap. Now, you can demand and force them to revitalize the health sector in Nigeria. No problem with that. But you can't attack them individually to prevent them from seeking healthcare that is important to them. Now, you can always attack the excessive payment that they get, but you cannot go after this. You're actually trampling on the freedom of choice, the freedom of association, freedom to choose whoever they want to trade with. And one of the things you are going to do, you are going to be attacking the Nigerians that would get the Nigerian businesses that would get their payment from those people. Now, you are attacking the government, but you are going to be attacking fellow Nigerians, fellow regular people that own that hospitals and what you may have. You are going to be attacking those people that own the schools, the hospitals and things like that. They won't be able to get their businesses anymore. That's what you are going to be having. Or at least you won't be able to get the businesses running as much as it would roll if you hadn't attacked them that way. Then the next one, of course, is an immediate end to the use of police or military personnel as private security guards for these officials. I totally agree with that. The police, Nigerian police, should not be guarding most of all these people. They can have their own bodyguards. They can have their own details, personal details. Should not be the government exactly. Even if it has to be the government, it should not exactly be the Nigerian police. There are other ones. There is the SS and some other institutions like that should handle that, not the Nigerian police. So the next one, because that actually makes the Nigerian police to become more and more political. You want them to be less and less political in their actions, to have moral clarity in when they are taking out, carrying out the law. You don't want them to be biased towards the particular party or not, or biased towards political figures and things like that. So I see their point there. Then the next one is the complete, which is in the third phase now, the complete and uncompensated repossession by the working people of all national resources stolen by the ruling class. Oh God. Now this is going to be a little difficult to parse. If by repossession they mean things that actually belong to the that are nationalized before, that are public properties, of course they say national resources. Repossession. Okay, repossession by the working people. I'm really scared that this is tending towards socialism. I'm really scared. Now, if it's about returning them back to the government, no problem. But if it's about things like, okay, everything, the means of production should return to the government more and more, and we are talking about the people, yes, collectivization and things like that, we are tending towards socialism. So we need to be very careful with that. I'm not exactly opposed towards it. If people have stolen from the government, stolen from the covers of the people, yeah, they should absolutely return all they have stolen, and they should be forced to return them. But we just have to be very careful. that we don't turn into socialism. Then the next one is complete and uncompensated seizure by the working people of all private wealth accumulated by public officials during and after their tenure of service. Private wealth. Now, this is very dicey. If it's about things that you can trace that they actually stole from the government, yes, I guess you can take them back. But if it's things that they didn't steal from the government and they got legally, paid legally to have those things, you cannot just take them back. This is really, really scary. It's tending towards socialism. Forced collectivization. That's what I'm saying in this. It's tending towards that. I don't see it completely happening, but it's tending towards that. We need to be very careful. It's tending towards socialism. Some of the demands of the AAC and the Revolution Now movement is tending towards socialism. Then we have the complete socialization, and this is the serious bomb. Like this is the bomb. Socialization. Now I've been thinking about it. Socialism. Now we are having socialization of all land in the country and declaration of our access to land as a basic right. This is absolute BS. This is dangerous. Like, this is seriously dangerous. This is like communist kind of policy. This is a communist policy. It's a socialist communist policy. It's abolition of property rights. That's what it's tending towards. Abolition of property rights. Now they're not even talking about from politicians that acquire these things wrongly and things like that. They're saying generally complete socialization of all land in the country, which means if you have land, your land could be taken away from you and made the property of the government. Things that you have can be taken away from you and made the properties of the government. It's very scary and very dangerous. Now, like I said before, I'm going to be making a video on the dangers of socialism and why socialism is like the death sentence of an economy, of a nation. Like, you go downwards and downwards and downwards, and socialism always leads into more torment of the people. Now, at first, they are going to use the words like the people's right and things like that to convince the people to fight for the cause and things like that. But at the end of the day, the power is going to end up with a group of people who are going to be the new ruling class. Now, the clamoring against ruling class now is going to end up with a new set of ruling class. And those people are going to be very brutal, because that's how it has always been. Any socialist economy always ends up in brutalism. I mean brutality. That's what happens. Again, Venezuela, against Vietnam, against North Korea. I mean, there are many, many examples of socialist countries. Always ends in serious brutality against the people that they say they were fighting for. At first they say it's the people. Always ends up in evil against the people themselves. Then we move over to the next one. To break the stranglehold, okay, to break the stranglehold of the ruling class on the political power by banning from politics all who have stolen the people's money and property since 1960. I agree with that. If you are found of guilty of corruption in the country, misappropriation of funds and things like that, of course you should be banned from government. You are not to be trusted with the people's resources anymore, so you should be banned. So I agree with that. Now the next one is to reduce the cost of governance by abolishing the Senate, thus establishing a unicameral legislature with only the House of Representatives. Yeah, I don't see any point to that. The Senate is important. It's a way. The Senate is important. It's a way to balance size of the legislature between big states and smaller states. We are a federal republic. Well, I'm going to be explaining that later on. But you need the Senate to be able to balance things out so that smaller states are not going to suffer, because bigger states have a consensus on a particular thing that smaller states are not interested in. So they don't just get run shot over by the bigger states or larger states, as you might put it, like Lagos and the rest. So that's why. So the Senate is important. Now, you can cut the funding for the Senate. Cut the budget for the Senate, cut the budget for the House. yeah, I'm all for that. They receive way too much. I mean, way too much. I mean, it's disgusting. I mean, the amount of money those people receive is just too much, just too much. We need to cut them. So I agree with that. I agree with that. We need to cut the funding for the legislative arm, and also even the presidency. We need to cut the funds for that. They are servants of the people, and they are not supposed to be people that just profit off and get rich by being in office. We need to make the office to be less enticing to people, so that less and less of those people who would want to use the place of government or the positions of government as an enriching enterprise, so that less and less of those people will get into government. But when it is very enticing to people like that are going to always be the ones that will get into the government, and those are the people that will do anything to get to that place. But if it's not as enticing in the aspect of funds, in the aspect of money, less and less of those crazy people will get into the government. So that's the way I see it. Cut the funds, make it less enticing for thieves to go into the government. Make it less enticing for them. Less and less of them will go to, less and less of those kinds of people will go into the government. Of course, some will still go, and some will still carry out corruptive acts and things like that. But less and less will go there when they know it's very, very difficult to get rich by being in government. So we need to disincentivize that sort of attitude. And of course, the next one is abolishing the death penalty except for the embezzling of privatization of the public wealth. Now, I see where they're coming from. They want it to be such that only those people who mismanage the public funds and steal the public funds should be subject to death penalty. I understand what they're trying to say. Yes, government officials who have defrauded the country should be subject to death penalty, even if we are in support of that. And I think I'm in support. Just that the problem is, once you make that into the law, how are you going to be sure that an innocent person is not going to be accused by the government because the person is in a different party, that the ruling party is not going to accuse innocent people of that and get them executed, permanently evicting them from the society? That's the danger. That's where the danger is. If we put so much power into the hands of the government, because who is going to have to enforce the law? Is the executive arm, which is the presidency, is going to have to enforce the law. At least branches under the presidency, we have to enforce the law, and they are all political. They have political influences because most of all those people, the ministers and the commissioners and things like that, they are political appointees. They were not elected, so they have political ambitions in mind, or at least it's some political intentions in mind. So you are going to be risking the lives of people, the innocent people in government, if you do that. So it becomes a way for you to get rid of your opponents, of the dissent, by simply accusing them and killing them off. That's the dicey part of this particular policy that I'm looking at. It's not so bad, but that's the dicey part. And also, I don't think you should abolish every single death penalty. I mean, for other heinous crimes like murder and things like that. I mean, are you seriously saying that people with first class or first degree murder and things like that should not be executed? I mean, we're not like America and all those crazy countries that believe that that capital punishment is inhumane and things like that. There are some people in this world that are worth receiving the capital punishment. So we should not abolish that. Yes, you can say that, okay, I guess you can argue that people who have been convicted, credibly convicted of having mismanaged public funds, should be executed, even though I don't support that exactly. But I guess you can make that argument, but you don't necessarily need to drop executing people with records of very heinous crimes. Then the next one is producing a new, which is the last one, producing a new constitution for Nigeria by a democratic and people-led process involving open discussion, debate, and determination of proposals and suggestions by the working people. Yeah, I'm absolutely in support of that. I have no issues with that. We can have the people having influence in the construction of a new constitution. So, checking through, the only objection I have towards this is just the leanings towards socialism. That's all. I don't think there's anything in their proposal that seems to try to depose the government. So I think the government's case against them, saying that they're trying to depose the government and things like that, is kind of weak. So I think I do support, or at least the people who believe that SOWORE'S just been run shot over, like it's just been attacked, like without any serious grounds for the prosecution and all those things coming after him. So that's the way I see it. Not very solid case. The government doesn't have a very solid case that he's trying to depose the country. It's actually very, very angry about the injustices in the country. Now, the way the movement is going, some of the policies of the movement are stepping over the boundaries, the borderline policies, and kind of very, very edgy, moving towards socialism, which is very dangerous. So that's the only thing I can say about that. But on average, I don't think the government should have any issue with SOWORE. Now, maybe it should rephrase the revolution now part of it, because it has very terrible connotations, especially when you add the problem of the red hats and the red beret worn by some of the activists for the revolution now. Seems like revolutionaries from the South Americans like Che Guevara and the rest of them, they like wearing beret and things like that. So it's very scary for anyone in power, because you're like, oh yeah, if these people start a popular uprising, they can actually overthrow the government. And not just about overthrowing the government, because you can think, oh yeah, they try to overthrow the Buhari government. Yeah, if there is a revolution, usually you don't get it. You don't get the country being handed over again to a democratic system anymore. You don't have a democratic system anymore. Most certainly you start having a military style system or quasi-military style system. So we don't want that. We want better discourse on this issue so that the nation can become better. That's what I would say. So see you next time, and subscribe to the channel, and comment, share the video, and see you guys.